بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وينزل عليكم من السماء ماء ليطهركم به ويذهب عنكم رجز الشيطان وليربط على قلوبكم ويثبت به الأقدام.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وصلى الله على محمد وآل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين. Dear brothers and sisters, in this session we are going to explain the rules regarding Istihaza. As you know well, a woman sees different types of blood. She discharges different types of blood, and each type of blood has its own specific rules, conditions, and of course features that need to be understood properly. Now in this session we are going to explain the rules of Istihaza. What is Istihaza and how can we distinguish Istihaza from other types of blood? The blood which is of course seen by women and which is yellowish in color and it's emitted without gush and without irritation is called Istihaza blood. Istihaza of course is the irregular blood that comes out. It is the blood that may come out for 1 day or 2 or 3 days. But there are intervals, pauses. So that's why it's called irregular blood. There are 3 kinds of Istihaza. The scholars, the jurisprudence have sorted out and divided Istihaza blood into 3 kinds. The first is little Istihaza. In jurisprudential terminology, the scholars have used the term qalil or little Istihaza. The second type of blood or the second kind of blood is medium Istihaza, which is termed as mutawassita, medium Istihaza or middle Istihaza. And the third type of blood is the excessive Istihaza, which is called kathira. Now, when it comes to the first type of Istihaza, what is the definition of little Istihaza or qalila? Of course, if the blood comes out and it remains on the surface of the wool or the pad which a woman uses, and it does not go into the pad, this is called little Istihaza. But of course, if the blood penetrates the wool and it enters the wool, but it does not go out of the other side of the pad and it does not soak the covering which is on the outer side of the pad, this is termed as medium istihaza. Now when it comes to the excessive istihaza, of course, the blood goes into the pad or the wool and it goes out of the other side of the wool and it soaks the outer covering because it's excessive. And of course, excessive blood has no limit. It might even go further. It might even soak the underwear, the trousers. So in case of excessive istihaza, the rules are different. The medium istihaza has its own rules, its own conditions, and little istihaza has its own rules and conditions. Now it's very important to distinguish, to discern between these three kinds of istihaza, because a woman sometimes sees blood and she does not actually know whether the blood which has just started coming out is little, it is medium, it is istihaza. So she should take notice of the definitions of the various kinds of istihaza. And of course, if she listens and watches this program, she should try to understand it. And if she fails to understand the various definitions for the various kinds of blood, then she has to refer to the epistles and the books of Islamic laws written by grand religious authorities. Now, one by one, we will start explaining the rules of these three types of blood. Beginning with the first type of blood, then the little istihaza. What should a woman do when she finds out that she is in the state of little istihaza? The grand religious authorities have said that a woman in the state of little istihaza or qalil istihaza should perform ablution for every prayer. Now she offers 5 obligatory prayers every day. She must, of course, make wuzu 5 times for each prayer. Now one wuzu would not be enough for the Zuhr and Asr prayers, for the noon and afternoon prayers. And one wuzu is not sufficient for the Maghrib and Isha prayers. She must make wuzu for each prayer. Now we can broaden this further. If she wants to offer a recommended prayer, or if she wants to offer a qadha prayer, again she has to make wudu for that prayer. She might have performed wudu just now, a few minutes ago. And she is in the state of wudu to offer one prayer. Now, if she wants to offer her obligatory prayer, now suppose she offers the Fajr prayers, and immediately after the Fajr prayers, she wants to start offering a recommended prayer or a wajib prayer. Maybe it could be, let's say, qadha prayer. She might have missed some prayers and she wants to make up those prayers. Again, she has to make wudu for that prayer. Now, let's assume she has offered the obligatory prayer and all of a sudden an earthquake takes place, which makes the Salat al-Ayat or the signs prayers obligatory. She has to perform wuzu for that prayer, even if there has been no time gap between the Fajr prayer and the Salatul Ayat. Now the criterion, the standard is that one wudu for one prayer, irrespective of whether that wudu, that prayer is recommended or it is wajib. And of course, if a woman wants to touch the script of the Holy Quran, if she wants to do an act which requires wudu, again she has to make wudu for that action. She cannot touch the script of the Quran without making wudu. That is an important point to take notice of. Now when it comes to medium istihaza, medium istihaza has its own rulings, its own specific conditions that need to be taken into consideration. As far as the medium istihaza is concerned, a woman in the state of medium istihaza or istihaza mutawassita should perform one ghusl in the morning if she starts bleeding in the morning, of course. But if she starts bleeding in the noon or during an afternoon, she has to perform one ghusl for the prayer, and that would be enough. As I said, medium istihaza means that the blood penetrates the wool and the pad, but it does not come out of the other side of the pad, and it does not soak the cowring on the outer side of the pad. So a woman who finds herself in the state of medium istihaza should perform one ghusl for the 5 prayers. Now, if her medium istihaza starts during the day, for example, before the midday prayers, she has to perform ghusl for the midday prayers. And that ghusl would be sufficient for the Maghrib and Isha prayers. It's not necessary to perform another ghusl for the Maghrib and Isha prayers, because one ghusl is enough. If she continues to remain in the state of medium istihaza on the next day, on the coming day, then of course again she has to perform one ghusl in the morning before dawn prayers. As I said, if a woman wants to do an act which requires ghusl, she must do that. She must make wudu, and wudu should be done, of course, according to some scholars, it should be done before ghusl. But okay, there are some scholars who have said that the wudu can be done for the prayers after ghusl. There is no difference. Even if you do it before or after ghusl, the wudu would remain valid. Now, what is important is to note that ghusl in excessive or in medium istihaza, in excessive and medium istihaza is not sufficient for wudu according to many scholars. In medium istihaza, you need to make wudu, of course. You need to make wudu, and ghusl is never sufficient for wudu. But when it comes to excessive istihaza, there are some scholars who believe that ghusl is sufficient for wudu. But again, you can perform wudu. If you perform wudu, there is no problem. You can do it. But there are some other scholars who believe that ghusl of excessive istihaza is not sufficient for wudu. And in that case, of course, you need to perform wudu. Wudu must be made and must be, of course, performed for the prayers. Now, what if blood if blood stops in the middle of the day, is it still necessary to perform ghusl? Now, for example, you have been in the state of medium istihaza or excessive istihaza, and it is before the midday that the blood stops. The blood has already stopped, and for example, the woman is now clean, but she has not done ghusl. Is it necessary to perform ghusl or not? Of course, in the case of excessive bleeding, the woman should change the pad first of all, and then she must do ghusl. The same is true with the medium istihaza. She was in the state of istihaza for a few hours, but before the prayer time started, the blood ceased to come out, and has stopped. Even there is no blood. Again, she has to perform ghusl, and she is not relieved of the obligation to perform ghusl. Now, what if a woman keeps a gap between prayers? For example, in the case of excessive istihaza, it has always been said by scholars that a woman should take immediate action to offer her prayers. She has just done and completed ghusl. Now the scholars have said that she must go to offer her prayers quickly. She must take quick action to offer her prayers. She has offered the Zuhr prayer but not the Asr prayers, and a time gap has taken place. She has delayed the afternoon prayer. In this case, is it necessary for the woman to perform ghusl once again or not? Of course, the ground religious authorities have said that if there is a time gap, if there is a gap between the two prayers, then she must perform ghusl once again, and she cannot offer the prayers, the second prayer, let's say the afternoon prayer and the Isha prayers, in case there has been a gap between the two prayers. Now it so happens sometimes it happens that the blood which a woman sees either stops or it changes from excessive or from little istihaza into medium istihaza, or from medium istihaza into excessive istihaza. The vice versa, the opposite is also true. The excessive blood might slow down and it might change into medium istihaza, or it may change even into little istihaza. What would be the position? What would be the Islamic law if the blood stops? Of course, if a woman has been, for example, let's see, if a woman is in the state of medium istihaza and she has performed ghusl, then after performing ghusl, she offered the prayers, and then she finds out that she is now in the state of little istihaza. In this case, it's not necessary to perform another ghusl if she wants to offer another prayers, because the blood, the type of blood has changed. In that case, it is necessary for her to make one wudu. If her medium istihaza has changed into excessive istihaza, then of course she has to perform another ghusl for the Maghrib and Isha prayers. Of course, her duty, her obligation changes in that case. Now, this shift, this change takes place maybe every now and then. What is necessary is that that a woman should check herself. She should examine herself and see whether the blood is little or medium or excessive. And of course, she must place a pad on her organ, or she must insert something to understand and to find out whether the blood which she discharges is little or medium or
ناجيتك يا رحمن ودعوتك يا ديان يا خالق الإنسان الله 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 يا خالق الإنسان الله الله الله.
She should investigate. In case, for example, she does not investigate and she knows that she might be bleeding, she might be in this state of excessive istihaza, but she does not investigate, she does not check herself, and she starts offering prayers. In that case, there is no doubt that her prayers would be invalid because she did not perform ghusl. But if she made wudu and thought, or even did not check herself with the intention, she made the wudu and offered the prayer with the intention of complying God's order, with the intention of qurbat, thinking that it was or it is her obligation to perform prayers, and she performed prayers with the intention of complying God's order, then of course her prayers are valid, even if she finds out later that of course that her istihaza was either medium or excessive. But if she deliberately does not check herself, she does not investigate the type of blood, in this case she has committed a sin by offering her prayers, because it was her duty in the first place to check herself, to investigate. Now, what if a woman actually wants to offer qada or recommended prayers while the woman is in the state of little or excessive istihaza? Should she do wudu for all prayers or not? Of course, as I mentioned in the beginning, it is necessary for a woman to make wudu for the istihaza, for the prayers. She has to make wudu. And wudu is not sufficient when it comes to excessive and medium istihaza. She must, in addition to wudu, perform ghusl, and there should not be any time gap between performing ghusl and performing prayers. A woman who has performed ghusl should immediately start offering prayers, and if she delays the prayers, again it would be necessary for her to perform ghusl in the case of excessive istihaza. Now a woman wants to enter the prayer, she enter a mosque, she wants to offer qada prayers, she wants to touch the script of the Holy Quran. Can a woman in the state of istihaza do all these things or not? The grand religious authorities have unanimously said that a woman in the state of istihaza can do all those things that a woman in the state of purity can do. She can observe fast, she can enter a mosque, she can touch the Quran, and she can after performing wudu and after doing ghusl, she can do everything. She can offer prayers and she can engage in any activities that require wudu. There are many people who naively believe that a woman who sees blood should not enter a mosque. No, a woman may see different types of blood. Yes, of course, if a woman sees the menstrual blood, the monthly blood, she cannot do any of these acts. She cannot touch the Quran. She cannot, of course, she cannot enter a mosque, and she cannot offer prayers. And of course, she is relieved of the obligation of offering prayers. But a woman in the state of istihaza must offer prayers, and she must also observe fast, and she is not relieved of the obligation of fasting. She is not relieved of other obligation. For example, if there is a thunder storm, or if there is a lightning, or if there is a storm which is horrific, which is terrifying, or there is an earthquake in the city where she lives, she must start offering prayers, and she must make wudu or perform ghusl, depending on the type of blood she is seeing, or depending on the type of blood which is being discharged. Now, if she discharges, of course, excessive blood, she must make ghusl and also perform wudu. According to some scholars, as I mentioned, wudu is not required, that ghusl is sufficient. But of course, majority of the prominent Shia scholars have said that ghusl of istihaza is not sufficient for wudu. If at the time of its initial appearance, the blood of istihaza remains within the interior of the body and does not come out, it does not nullify the wudu, and it does not nullify the ghusl. The ghusl which has already been performed, and the wudu which has already been made. And if it comes out, of course, it nullifies the wudu and ghusl, even if its quantity is very little. And of course, if a woman in the state of istihaza examines herself after namaz and finds no blood, she can say other prayers with the same wudu and with the same ghusl. It is not necessary for her to renew the wudu or renew the ghusl, because there was no blood after performing prayers. She can carry on the prayers and she can continue praying. But of course, if blood comes out, then she has to act according to the rules, according to her obligation. These are some of the rules which we stated regarding istihaza. Of course, for further information, for further details regarding istihaza, of course, you have to turn to the books and to the epistles written by ground religious authorities. Of course, a woman has a lot of difficulties when it comes to the types of blood, especially a woman in her monthly period. It's very difficult for many women to identify, to discern, to distinguish the type of blood. And it's very confusing. It's not easy to tell the rules even. It is not even easy for a mujtahid to explain the rules. The rules remain to be confusing and difficult. But of course, a woman herself, she knows better her conditions. She can better check herself. She can better understand than a person who tells the rules, than a person who explains and elaborates on the rules. Inshallah, in the next session to come, I will elaborate on the rules of Haiz. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
اللهم انفعنا بالعلم وزينا بالحلم وجملنا بالعافية وكرمنا بالتقوى إن وليي الله الذي نزل الكتاب وهو يتولى الصالحين